Hello friends and welcome back. I have been asked non-stop, I don't know the last time I've been asked this often, what my opinion is on a movie. In a Violent Nature has been released, limited release in North America, and in Canada, not in Australia. So I've been asked non-stop by you guys what I think about this film, but unfortunately it's been unavailable to me. But a huge thank you to Miranda, because when I thought I was giving up, I finally got access, so big shout out. I have obtained a screener to review this film, so that is exactly what we're gonna do today. And I actually don't know much about this film because I didn't think it was gonna come out here. I stayed even further away from anything as usual. I mean, I'm wearing my Death Before Spoilers t-shirt, so you know the vibe. But I do know that this film was directed by Chris Nash, who does not have a big background in terms of directing, but he does have an extensive catalogue as a credited member of a special effects team. He has been in so many horror films and very divisive horror films working in that department. And this movie, I can tell you, half of you who have messaged me about it hated it and half of you love it. So I'm really intrigued. From what I know, it's about a vengeful spirit that haunts the site where a crime was committed. But I also believe that this might be from the point of view of the killer, and that's the big hurrah. That's all I know. I haven't looked at any trailer. I thought we'd do something a little bit more cozy today. Instead of just doing a scripted review, we're gonna go do a chill one because it seems like you want my reaction. You want my come with me reaction, but because we're watching at home, you're gonna come chill with me. And it's very stormy today in Perth, Western Australia. It's winter here, so I am ready. Let's go get cozy and hopefully scared. Let's go. Well, that was super interesting. I can definitely see why people are on the fence about this film, 100%. The film is it's such an interesting piece of horror cinema because it kind of highlights two things that don't normally go together, and it probably is a really small Venn diagram of the people that are super interested in it. But when it hits, it would hit really, really hard in a good way for those people. I talk to a lot of different horror fans and even a lot who are in my community, in my Discord. I can tell what kind of films they like from things they've said in the past. And this is such an interesting niche, but so clever. It's clever and you can't disregard that. But does the idea of this film really outweigh any negatives? I'm going to talk about this film as spoiler-free as I can, but in saying so, it is great to go in blind. The film is a very slow burn, and a lot of people are saying it's from the perspective of the killer, and I don't even know if it's marketed that way, but I would disagree with that. This film is almost from the perspective of the land, from all the forest, or you're impartial to anyone's arc, to following anyone's journey. You're in the middle and you're picking up the pieces. The film is set in a wooded area where an entity is regenerated, where an entity comes back after an item at the very start of the film is moved. And this has to do with what is probably grounding his spirit and keeping him there. Then we go on this strange, quiet, still journey where we follow him trying to get this item back. This is a slasher that is a slow burn without music, without crazy handheld POV shots, without action sequences, although very bloody and very gory. It reminds me of a ghost story, but in through an indie lens, because the film is not polished, and I think that really adds to the appeal, or it just makes it so much better that a film like this was done by indie filmmakers, because it's such a creative expression of what people can do when they don't have huge studio control. And I feel like if this script got into the hands of the wrong person, it would be a completely different film. They would have done it as a prequel to, you know, Friday the 13th. They would have made it into a franchise story, but it really is a simple, drawn out story, and the beauty is in the simplicity. In saying that, there is a reason that this film could be grating. There isn't much payoff. It is a very, as I've said, slow-moving film. It does have amazing moments where the slashings take place. It is a slasher, and as we were talking about before, when I mentioned the director, that was 100% what I was hoping he would do. Very intense scenes, very awesome practical effects, very gory. The film also, one of the best things about it that makes it blur that, not even blur that line, it's like almost a killer, like a villain that we know and we love from all these horror movies steps into realism. And something that really helps that is the sound design of this film. There is no music. There is one bit of music, but it's played through like someone's headphones, but there is no music. And I think that it was such a strange feel because we're so used to all of the overdramatics in slashers, or especially like I guess 80s slashers and teen slashers. We're used to all of the rules, and you know we're going so meta that this film is kind of the opposite, where we're just going to realism and showing that from a different perspective, but it's not from the perspective of the killer. It's asking the viewer, what would it actually look like if a slasher took place in real life? And it's not over dramatic. It's not these crazy intertwined stories. It doesn't play up the characters. The dialogue, I will say, is a little bit, it can be cringy. I wrote down one line while I was watching that I really wanted to use as a example of this. At the very start as well, I'm not going to tell you anything that happens later. I'll have my rifle kiss you a goodbye. I did think it got better when there's more characters and a friend group that's introduced, but it was a little bit touch and go. It was very touch and go. And I do think it needs to have a long time, and even though that these scenes do feel grating and really drawn out because of the way that the camera is situated, the lack of intense action sequences, the editing, there's a lot of static shots. I mean, there is some tracking shots, they're done very smoothly, but there's a lot of static shots where you just watch something carry out in a scene and you're from all the way back, you know, amongst the trees, and you don't see any detail. And it's just not letting you play it out as a dramatic, highly edited, fictionalized piece of work. It's really asking you to imagine it is real and that it's happening in a place that I guess is more relatable to the naked eye. The fact that there's no music and you just hear the atmosphere as he's walking, and that it is slowed down and you do see these whole scenes of him just walking along a piece of landscape, it does feel like a lot. And this is where I think this Venn diagram comes in. I feel like this film is slasher and experimental, and there is never really, I know there's a little bit, I would think Behind the Mask is a really good example of something that is in the middle of this, but there's not a lot of experimenting that goes on with slashers. We do get meta, and I do think Scream has done some really push the envelope, but they always stay within the rules of the slashers, and that's the whole point, right? They may play on that, but it is always playing on the audience and what they expect. And this is just taking a completely different perspective altogether, which I think is fantastic. And although some of the scenes seemed quite monotonous, drawn out, I feel like they had to do it this way to really give the film that realistic feel. That feel like it is experimental, but not because it's surrealism, which we see a lot these days with experimental film. I'm thinking about films like Skinamarink, Ennis Main, films which rely on intense stylization, grading, and editing to really transform your mind and try and tap into a different psychological part of you to attach to nostalgia and yeah, you know, just give the creepy feeling of you. But this film does it in a completely different way where it takes something that is already known for its stylized approach or really storytelling approach with slashers and completely draws out of it and really puts it on its head. And for that, I really enjoyed it. But I do think it's kind of like a one-trick pony. I was really happy to see that they still gave us the blood and gore and grit. I think that those scenes were absolutely wild, and anyone who's a fan of Terrifier, move over art. You know what I mean? Like, move the fuck over. You're in trouble. Because this guy really, he is amazing at what he does. And this was such a good display of his work in an original, very original setting. So I think it was fantastic in that regard. It is very indie. It's very raw. And this is exactly what kind of raw film works for horror. I've seen a lot of people go in to make a horror movie because they find it's going to be the cheapest, easiest option when they start off filmmaking. I think horror is the hardest genre to pull off, and this approach is what is amazing because this is unique. You're not just trying to do another story that is going to be completely looked over. You've got something to actually say, and for that, I find it really commendable. Did I have the best time watching it? The start, loved it. The vibe, when I realized what was happening and how it was transforming, loved it. But after that sets in, there's not much it can do but fulfill its obligation. And it has to fulfill it in a certain way to stay true to the message it's sending. So stuck within realism, there is no huge payoff. That is what it is, but it has to do that to be a strong film in its conviction. I am really glad I saw it though, and I do think it's worth your time if you are into original films, you don't mind challenging yourself a little bit in a watch, and you can take a slow burn. But I do really recommend every horror fan to watch it. I feel like this is such an interesting direction, and I'm glad it's getting a lot of hype because this is what we want to see. Completely different stories that I can't believe this hadn't been done before. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy that this is the first time. But again, we have seen films like Behind the Mask that takes a different approach to the slasher genre, and let's hope this continues. I want to see what's next for this director. I would normally give a film like this that I kind of just enjoyed like a 6, but because of how strong it felt and how much it fulfilled the intent of the filmmaker, it's definitely a 7 for me. For originality, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And for scare, I'm going to give it a 7 for gore. For gore, I don't think it's very scary. I think it takes the scare away the way it's put together, but the gore, beautiful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't seen yet, I did a video on high anxiety movies. These are high anxiety horrors and thrillers, movies that will make you spiral, intended to make you spiral. That is the intent of the filmmaker. Check it out, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye.